Thanks for tuning in to the Real Women Chronicles podcast. I am your international certified life coach, Tiadra Taylor. The sole purpose of this podcast is to get you from where you are now to where you want to be. Yes, it's time to break chains and to get unstuck. Thanks again for joining in. Let's begin. Welcome to another week of the Real Women Chronicles podcast. I go by the name Coach T. I am your virtual life and relationship coach. Listen, this week I want to talk off of the tagline of how to start loving yourself. I honestly think, especially in today's society, we don't put enough importance on that topic. We assume that, because a person appears so put together on the externally, that they must have a deep love for themselves. And being a coach for many years, one thing that I can say is that many well-adjusted individuals have problems loving themselves, which is why they end up getting themselves in relationships with people who don't deserve them. This is why they end up settling for positions and roles in people's lives that are lower than God's expectations for them, right? Because they don't love themselves, and they don't love themselves enough to really, really reach for more, and to not even reach for more, but to know that they deserve more. To put it in a better way. So this week, I wanted to address that. It's been some time since I addressed it. And it's crazy, guys. I'm almost like, I don't know, another maybe almost year away from being at 200 episodes. I've been at this podcast thing for quite some time. So I thank all of you guys who listen to the podcast. I just really appreciate you guys. I really do. And let me just say this. If you listen to this podcast, do me a favor. If this podcast is really, really helping you out and you listen to this podcast each and every week, if you have an iPhone, the iPhone has it should be purple and white icon app. It's a podcast app. If you listen to my podcast through that app, or whether you're not, go to that app or either go to iTunes and go ahead and leave me a rating on my podcast. That really, really helps other people come on to this podcast and help. It helps me help others as well. I'm a firm believer that, what motivates me may motivate you. And I don't hold that away from you guys. You guys know how I am. And I just pray that you do the same. If you know somebody else that could be moved, even if you don't, by you just leaving a comment, letting the folks know that you're moved by my podcast on, like I said, iTunes, or just go to that podcast app on iPhones. I only know about iPhones. Sorry, all of my Droid users, but I would assume that you guys have a podcast app as well. Yeah, and just leave me a rating, please. Okay. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this week's podcast. Again, we're talking about how to start loving yourself. If you love yourself in some ways, then let's talk about how to start loving yourself more. Either way, these bullet points that I've written down will help you. Okay. The first point that I want to bring attention to is self-discipline. One thing that I personally learned is that self-discipline often increases self-love. What does self-discipline mean to you? Does self-discipline mean you setting a goal and accomplishing it? Whether it's a weight loss goal, whether it's a career goal, whatever that may be. Self-discipline often equals self-love. Because the truth is, in order for you to be disciplined, to be better in an area, to look better maybe in an area, that's showing yourself, right? Not don't worry about other people, right? That's showing yourself that you love yourself enough to be disciplined enough to take better care of yourself, whether that's mentally, physically, or emotionally. You love yourself enough to be disciplined enough to put yourself in a better predicament than you are now. And I think a lot of people don't realize that that's where self-love really grows. If you ever notice, most people that struggle with achieving goals, or their goals that, well, let's say any goal. It doesn't matter what the goal is, right? Whether it's mentally, physically, or emotionally, like I stated before. Most people that struggle in these areas often are those that don't believe in themselves, often are those who lack self-love. But guess what? Once you start moving, once you start knocking out those goals, that self-love is increased. Number 2, embrace the things you can't change. And I know we've all heard it a million times, right? But I'm just going to reiterate it here because this is just a point on the journey to loving yourself more that we just can't ignore. And sometimes it takes a person to beat it in your head. Embrace those things that you can't change, because it's going to be those things that you cannot change that is going to make you unique. It's going to be those things that you cannot change that's going to be special to the person that God sends into your life to love you. Those things that we cannot change about ourselves are the things that make us different. And instead of being critical over it, once you learn how to embrace it, you're going further down that journey of loving yourself and falling deep in love with yourself. But here's the kicker. Brings me to my point number 3. Set out to change the things that you can. And that kind of coincides with my first point. I know about self-discipline, but we have to be willing to change the things that about ourselves that we can. If you lack emotional control, maybe it's time to change that. That's in your power. If you keep letting people into your space and your home and your life in general who don't deserve you, who aren't treating you right, this is something that you can change. No more being the author of your own misery. Change the things that you can. Number 4, I believe the journey to self-love is often about forgiveness. And the more we learn to forgive ourselves and let go of that guilt that often tries to torment us and keep us in bondage, we're released. We're releasing ourselves, and we're free to love on ourselves more. Yes, you made some mistakes. We all have. Okay, and one thing I can tell you about me, I'm not backing down from any of the mistakes I made, because that's what makes me the coach that I am today. But more than anything, I'm not ashamed, and I think not forgiving yourself and walking around with guilt is almost sometimes a sense of shame. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Back then you were that way. But in that relationship, you made that decision and you feel like someone looks at you crazy now. Forgive yourself. Let go of that guilt. Because in forgiving yourself, again, you're moving on that journey of just being gentle with yourself and taking care of you and not beating yourself up mentally. Okay? Number 5, stop comparing yourself to others. If you need to log out of social media and go on a social media fast, it's time. There's always going to be somebody out there prettier. There's always going to be somebody out there more fit. It's always going to be somebody out there with more money and all of this stuff. But comparison is what kills your confidence. Stop comparing yourself. Again, God made you the way you you are because he did not make a mistake. He did not. And get it. I know there's so much cosmetic surgery out here. Just to each his own. I don't knock anybody. But what I can say is this. If you're one of those people that are out there comparing yourself and you're wondering why you're not rich and you're wondering why your body don't fall like everybody else's, just know that you're picking away at your self-love. You're picking away at your self-esteem. And if that's some place that you want to get to, this is vital. The act of stopping, comparing yourself to other people is vital. Number 6, focus on what you like about yourself. I have been overly critical about, I want to achieve this, I want to do this. And I had to learn, especially as I mature in age, girl, you're doing a good job. Sometimes you need to pat yourself on the back and focus on the things that you've accomplished. Focus on the things that you've grew up from. The more you focus on the things that you like about yourself, the less time you have to focus on the things that you don't, or the things that are wrong about you. Number 7. You're only as attractive as you believe you are. And it can go into the comparison thing, but I decided to make this its own bullet point because I think many people don't realize that confidence is what makes people even more attractive. For many years, we think it's solely looks. Oh my gosh, this person, has it all, pretty face or handsome face. But the trick is, well, not trick, but the gag is that you actually are as attractive as you believe yourself to be. So if you believe yourself to be attractive, other people start to become convinced. And I'm sure each one of you guys can think of a person that you know, or a person in your life that, maybe first looking at them, according to the outside world, right? That they may not be the best looking man or best looking woman, but the personality and their confidence is so big that you're like, oh my God, you are the it person. Remember that. You're only attractive as you believe. And nobody else is going to find you attractive or as attractive until you first believe that you are. Number 8, break free from those people who aren't loving you how you want to be loved. You don't know how many people I coach who's had their self-esteem and their love for oneself beat down and tainted because they chose to allow a person who's not loving them the way they deserve to be loved too close to them. And those type of toxic people come into your life and they snatch those things away from you. They eat at your confidence. They eat at your love for oneself by picking out things that they claim are flaws to make themselves feel bigger. In order to get on this journey of self-love, you may have to make some tough decisions about the people who aren't really loving you the way that you deserve to be loved. Last but not least, you also have to start loving yourself how you want others to love you. We're teaching them. Guys, we are teaching people how to love us. I know you probably all heard it before, but I'm going to say it again. You're teaching them. So now it's time. Maybe you just have to have that time with yourself to love on yourself, to figure out what floats your boat and what doesn't, so that you can teach somebody else. Because if you don't know, how can someone else know? How can we even hold them accountable to making us feel valid?